Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast. We fashion ourselves television judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-hosts Mattson,
better read than dead,
and Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in, especially those watching that end up watching us live. But we appreciate everybody listening, watching, tuning in, all that fun stuff. Go ahead, hit that like, subscribe, bell notification button, hit the follow, all those buttons to help keep up with what we do. We go live every Monday now, so at least for the next little while. And right now we're doubling up on shows, but this first segment we're gonna start with the wow, my brain just
the Rings of Power
right there. Wow. So we're gonna start with the Rings of Power, and then we'll move on to the House of the Dragon. But first and foremost, the Rings of Power. I have quite a bit to say.
Before you do, JJ, because I'm kind of curious. I know Mattson just took a bite of whatever he's eating, but I'm kind of curious because you and I talked about this. Mattson,
it's funny. I was going to do the same thing. So yeah,
good.
Go ahead.
Too bad. I beat you to it.
Yeah,
curious what Mattson thinks because you haven't, dove into the lore quite as deeply as
not
JJ
even close. I've read the books. I've read The Hobbit, but that was a long time ago. I don't remember much. So yeah, fire away.
I'm
like
curious,
just what I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I have. What's the island human people called again?
Numenor.
Like, I don't know what the hell that's about, but they seem like as close as humans could get to being elves, basically, and they live in like this utopian, amazing society. I mean, for one, their stone carvers are amazing. Like, let's just stop and think about that for a second. But this division between human and elf, like, that made sense to me. But then I know you guys don't like Galadriel's backstory so far, and I don't know how accurate that is, or if it is at all. But not knowing anything, and then like the elves in the camp, and how the orcs are, I should say, goblins. Am I supposed to say what's the proper term for them? Are they?
They're orc.
They are orc. What's the difference between
orcs.
Orc and goblins? And they're not called goblins. What are they called?
They have goblins. The goblins are just much smaller.
Yeah. Man. Like, I appreciate what looks like to be the backstory of how Mordor was founded. I don't necessarily have a problem with how it's going about. I'm very intrigued to see what's the, is it Adar, right? Did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm. New character, by the way. Like, that's not a...
Okay, well, I mean, they didn't show me who it was. I like that I saw like a claw hand thing. I'm cool with that. I don't know. Like, I don't exactly know where we're going, and I don't know if that's a good thing, but I don't quite... I mean, I don't really care for the Harfoot people and the whole Gandalf thing. Like, that part's... But I was kind of like that in the Lord of the Rings, too. Anytime we got fully in the Hobbit lore, like, it was kind of a turnoff for me just because, I don't know, like, it just wasn't my thing. So that part's kind of... I don't really care, but I am really intrigued about Numenor and the island and what's going to happen there. It seems fascinating. I like the elves that were in prison that are digging these tunnels or what's ever happening. Long-winded answer to say, I don't quite know what's happening, but I don't mind it. But is it at times slower paced? Sure, but man, I love the world building and it is visually stunning. Like, send me there.
Yeah. I do like
Numenor was cool to see.
Yeah, Numenor was way cool to see. Well, and I love like the tie-ins, the architectural tie-ins to Gondor.
Yeah, like I could see a lot of that. I could see where I mean, as I understand it, Isildur, and I know, like, I didn't talk about that, but I know I was like, oh, so is that correct? It came from here to there, and so I started to make those connections, and I'm intrigued how that's going to work out, what that looks like, and I don't know, like, I love a good backstory, and it seems like we're kind of getting that, and I'm not unconcerned about it, but I don't know what you guys know, and again, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was asking Alec last night, or I said, I was like, I think that I would be really enjoying this show if I didn't know what I know. And before I go ham and shit all over this thing, because I'm not going to actually even do that, but I do want to talk about some of the things that I really like. Visually, this show continues to get better and better. Numenor was outstanding, and I'm loving the tunnels, the orc tunnel, like, and how they're explaining that's to keep them. They got the weird like dragon scale type coverings to keep the sun off of them and things like that. So visually outstanding. I have nothing but high praise for the new characters that aren't part of the canon in the past and things like that. So I mean, there's a lot of positives to this show. I actually am enjoying Nori and the Hardfoots quite a bit. Like,
I like Nori, but I don't know. Sometimes, I don't know.
well, and I think you're starting to see the division, right? So they're starting to show where possibly we end up with half of this group moving to become, because she's a Brandywine, right? Or is she a Brandywine,
Brandyfoot.
right? Brandyfoot.
Brandyfoot.
And some of the very popular and most famous hobbits are Brandywines. So
Or Proudfoots.
So you're getting some crossover there. So it wouldn't surprise me if you saw the split where you get Smeagol's side, the cousins, and then the other side go to the Hobbit side. And so you're starting to see some of that split a little bit there, which is cool. And I like that. But there's a lot of things that are driving me
Before
nuts.
you driving it, you guys bash all over it. Why does the CGI look so good in this? Because, man, it's impressive. Like, it's so good compared to other TV shows that I'm watching. Like, when you came into Newmore, I was looking at Taylor. I was like, man, that looks so real, and I'd love to go there right now. And I know it's completely fake.
Because they spent $1 billion on it.
That's a lot of it. But
Well,
the
man,
other piece of it is
sometimes money works.
the other piece of it is they do practical stuff as well. They're not doing everything CGI. Your landscapes, your buildings, your far shots obviously are CGI, but they're good at that stuff because you don't have the details. But when you get in close, what they're doing is the costumes and the makeup for like the orcs and things like that are at least partially practical. So you don't have the, like we've talked about with She-Hulk, where you have CGI battling other CGI, and you have very detailed stuff. They've made it so that the detailing is CGI, but the actual makeup and stuff is there and it's practical and it's on a sometimes CGI background. Like in Numenor, a lot of that stuff is CGI, but it's the details. It's not the whole set. And I think that's the part where even Peter Jackson got it right in the original trilogy, and even more so in the Hobbit trilogy. As much as I don't love that trilogy of movies, he combined practical with CGI in a way that really pushed the technology forward. And people have just forgotten that if you take a little more time and actually do some practical effects with your CGI, it looks amazing.
Yeah, they've got that down pat. And I love their use of the map as well. I have to say, bringing that in and kind of showing, because now the map that I did know that has different names, now I'm like, oh, like, all right, I know exactly where we're at, what we're doing. I've actually really appreciated that. I know that maybe you could feel like it's pulling you out of the narrative or something, but I think it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah.
No, I liked it, especially with the sigil, where she has it overlay and it's like, oh, turn it sideways. And all of a sudden it makes part of the map. That was really
that was cool.
That was like one of my favorite plot points of the show the entire time.
Yep, that's Southron.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that part, that was a sweet reveal where you were wondering, like, what the hell is it? And I was like, man, they did that really well, like, spot on.
Well, and I like that it's not the Eye of Sauron, because that's what I'm like, really? We're already going with the Eye of Sauron? He's still in his physical form. He doesn't need that shit yet. So why are we doing that? So I was really excited when I saw that.
Oh, yeah. It was well done.
So, from my understanding, because Sauron's still around, at some point we're going to get to the battle of, like, Sauron fighting Isildur, and that could be many seasons down the road, because this is, like, the progression we are getting to, as I understand. Granted, we have a ways to go, because Isildur is, what, like, 17 or something?
Yeah, and they're long-lived, but from where we're at Numenor, you have about 200-ish years, roughly, until we get to that fight.
Yeah. Wait, but the guy that's on the little 17-year, that's not the same
That's the same as Isildur. They live a long time.
The Dunedain, those men that are so here. I'll give you some backstory because they mentioned him in this episode.
Are they like half elf?
No, but they were given long life.
Yeah, so there were two.
By who?
Eru and Luvatar?
That one. So there were two sons, Elrond and Elros, right? We've met Elrond. We're all very familiar with Elrond. His brother, Elros, chose to be human, and Elrond chose to be an elf. So they're brothers, but they chose two different, they chose a mortal life.
How the hell does that work? I thought they would, is that just like lore and that just, it is what it is?
No, it's a complex.
We see it a little bit in the original trilogy where Arwen gives up her immortality for Aragorn.
Yeah. So you're saying that other guy, but he would have been a baby and he made that decision, or
no? So he was an elf, full-fledged elf.
Oh, okay. And he decided to give it up, and because he started to intermingle, his longevity gene started to trickle into the human race, and something like that.
So the original, when they came over to Middle Earth, everyone that came to Middle Earth had long or almost immortal, if not immortal, lifelines. So there's a whole story in the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales that talk about this family, and then that choice between Elrond and Elros. And so Elros goes on and has the island of Numenor, creates this great land of long-lived, what they call the Dunedain. And Isildur is the son of, like, the great grandson. Isn't he the great grandson?
I think there might be a couple more.
Is that the king that they mentioned that got
He's the grandson of the king, because Elros isn't alive at this point, or shouldn't be, or he's gone.
But the next king got banished because they wanted to keep that connection. Okay.
So this is where I think like Tolkien's writing is brilliant.
Yes.
Because the way he intermixes this, the Numenorians decide as humans, right? Human nature, that they don't want to play nice with the elves anymore. They're jealous of the elves. They don't think that the elves should have eternal life while they don't. And so they've become extremely petty and extremely upset at the elves for no reason. That's where this rift comes in.
Yeah. It's over nothing besides the fact that their ancestor chose mortal life for the beauty of being immortal versus living immortality.
But they're living for like, what, 200 to 300 years?
Minimum.
Jeez, people, that's a long time.
I'm pretty sure when you get into the Lord of the Rings, what's his face lived for like 600 and Aragorn, wasn't he?
He was 212.
Was it only 200? I thought he was like 600 something, because he was 80 in the books when it started.
Shoot, that would have changed the whole thing with Arwen. And like, she was worried about him, like she was gonna outlive him. Like, dude, if he's gonna live for another 200 years, just die with him. Like, you're fine.
Well, that's pretty much how it went.
Yeah. But it's so funny because it's that the grass is always greener. So whatever we can't have, we want.
Okay, well, I can see why there'd be hostility and annoyance, and that makes sense. So they didn't really explain that, though, to like
they
a
didn't
common
do a
user.
good job.
Well, they have to be very careful with that story because of the rights. They don't have the rights to the Silmarillion, which is where that story comes from.
I guess that. All right. I mean, for me, I just knew that there was definitely a deep-seated dislike that I was like, we already know in Lord of the Rings that at some point elves, human, and dwarves all turn on each other, hate each other. I was like, it's just part of what goes on. So I mean, it didn't change anything for me. It's just cool to know that now.
Yeah, to be fair, elves haven't helped.
No, they're kind of dicks too. I mean, in their own ways. It's one of those things where they're both very, and then of course the actual normal lifespan humans in the Southlands and then throughout Middle Earth really don't like them because they're both dicks to them. But it was kind of interesting because when they did talk about Elrond and Elros and they showed that mural, it was basically word for word out of the original trilogy what it was Arwen in the movie, but in the books it was a different elf altogether that I can't remember his name. But he mentioned, it was almost word for word the mention of the two stories and how they explain it, because they can't use the detail out of the Silmarillion, it's a really cool story to read, But that was, and I had no problem with how they managed it in this. I think my problem is I don't know what the timeline is.
Which is also my problem.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And I would be okay if they just said we are in, like, I don't know I keep saying it. SA, is it SA?
Second age.
The second age 2000, right? If they just gave us where we're at, I can live with strange things happening out of timeline. What I can't do is go, what I'm having a hard time with is going, okay, I have 6 timelines in my head during the second age, and all of them have pieces that I'm seeing and I can't pinpoint. So I'm confused while I watch the show. And that's my problem is all I'm thinking about is where does this fall in the timeline versus watching and enjoying the actual plot and the action and the acting that I should be watching. And when I do, sometimes I've had to stop and go, Jesus, Crowder, and rewind that to watch it in full because I get distracted by, wait a minute, Theodore's in this? Where are we at in this timeline? And then I start thinking about, well, good Lord, like Elendil's this age, he was that freaking Narsil that she just gave him. Like, I'm like, all these things that I get confused on. And I think if they just give me a timeline, I'd shut my pie hole and leave it alone and just go, okay, they can't make all the timelines work. They need these characters. They need these stories. I'd be much more forgiving of the things that didn't fit within the timeline if I had a timeline. But we don't have one right now.
Yeah. I mean, I would be okay with even this where, I mean, JJ, you and I talked about it. It doesn't take 1,000 years to cross the Sundering Sea.
Yeah.
But if, because she was kind of on her way to the Undying Lands, Galadriel.
Yeah.
Before she apparently had a 1,500-year time jump. If they even wrote something in that the light from the Undying Land sped up time, I'd be okay with something like that, where it was a time jump or a time slip because you're so close to the Undying Lands where time doesn't really matter to get where we are. Because we have on the one hand Elrond, he's in Eregion with Celebrimbor. They're in about 1,500 of the Second Age, and then you have Numenor, and we're in 3,300 of the Second Age. So there's a huge just discrepancy on where we actually are. If they just said, hey, we're making up our own story, deal with it. I'd be fine.
Like, if they're like, we're in the year 2000 of the Second Age, and guess what, we're going to truncate this timeline so that Celebrimbor is working on his forge, and we're having Numenor be in this state of phase where we might see the displacement or the civil war of Numenor and the leaving for Middle Earth and getting the 2 kingdoms of the Numen or of the Dunedain. I'd be okay with that if they just told me this is what's happening, but here's your 2 separate storylines. But right now, like Alex said, you got 2 very separated stories happening right now. And so for me, my brain goes, what the shit?
Just needs to be like Westworld, where you don't know that this is supposed to be
2 timelines.
Yeah.
And
they're going to
I had that thought already.
Point. Yeah, that's
and
where
that may be what they're doing.
I think you need, if again, I don't know that, and I'm like, this is great, like cool. That's one of the things I like where I say I don't like the Harfoot stuff, but it's fine. But I just like the other stuff so much more. And there's all these interesting plots happening, and I'm like, man, it's gonna come together. And they added this Adar guy at the end, and I'm like, I'm excited to see who the hell that is. That sounds cool. And I know, while he's not part of the lore, I think it's a smart decision because you got to give us somebody that's going to be a driving force for now. And Tolkien can't write everything. We can add some little
for sure,
B-level bad guy, and I'm pumped about that because I'm like, let's go. Like, give me somebody.
Well, the characters they've added are the best ones.
Yeah,
Aralid, the elf.
Yeah, he's cool.
Dude is amazing.
Yeah,
the actor's great, and he's done such a great job. And he's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he hasn't existed until the show.
Yeah. Well, and I was itching for the human woman too and her son. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I want to see more. So
I'm sure we will. We just can't fit it all.
But that's to Alex's point, I've enjoyed more the characters that haven't existed until this show than I have the ones that have, because again, I'm too busy trying to figure out how they're coexisting in this world right now. So
absolutely drives me nuts.
Yeah. And the other thing is, this stranger dude better not, because they'll just freaking ruin it even more. Because I got to thinking about it after we talked about the first 2 episodes. It cannot be the wizards, because they don't come to Earth. Meaning,
So that's not Gandalf?
It's probably going to be, but
it should be based on timelines, because Gandalf and his people, so Radagast and Saruman, those guys don't actually show up on Middle Earth until the Third Age. And not like at the start of the Third Age. They're like 1,000 years into the Third Age when they show up on Middle Earth. So we're like 3,000 years away at the best timeline I can figure out from them even being on Middle Earth. So this is another one of those. Now, I could see, because the one separation, when you're talking about timelines, I could see them wrapping up a timeline with Galadriel and now a Numenor and Elrond and Celebrimbor, tying those 2 timelines together, truncating it. And then we have the stranger, and because everything else to me seems to be, even with the new one, right? The new characters and the humans down in the Southlands, all of that makes sense tied together because we've got ties to those. The one thing we do not have any ties to is the Harfoots and the stranger. So there may be a time gap, because that story of the Harfoots and the stranger have been completely separate from the other storylines. There's been no connecting pieces, whereas the other ones, there are connecting. It's connected all 3 of the other storylines at this point. So, yeah, I can see that.
But I guess if it's like that, I sometimes wonder why directors don't just make that distinguishment up front. But I mean, at other times we've seen a show like Westworld where there is a reason where they're doing things in this way, and you just kind of have to give faith to that. But you're telling me though, if they're going to turn that into Gandalf and they tie that Harfoot potential wizard story into this, you're going to be pissed, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, probably. I want another new character. Give me somebody else that's this powerful being. That,
I mean, or like if they put it a wizard in the Second Age, like, I don't know, fine. Like, why does it? That could be cool.
Sure, and I'm sure that there were some, just not the ones that we know. Sure. And I'm okay with them being different. But I would almost rather this be like some strange backstory of being he's actually Sauron and this turns out to be his shape-shifting form, and for some reason he's memory's gone because of like the transition, or because there's never any indication of what he was like when he was outside of his full Sauron form, right? So I think it would be cool, because we don't have that. Like, if he's, by changing that form, he's had to kind of rebuild himself, and then he falls to Middle Earth and he's kind of figuring himself out, because we've seen the dude can be a dick. And he's got a good handle on fire. And I'm telling you, I cannot let go of the fact that crater that he was laying in looked a lot like Sauron's eye. So
the only problem I would have with that is he didn't know about the Shire and hobbits.
True. That's true.
In the original trilogy. That would be the only hiccup, is that he had no idea about.
Yeah, he didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Remind me,
everything
Saruman and Sauron, which one is who again? I always get them confused.
Sauron's the big bad. Saruman's the wizard, the white wizard.
Right. All right. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, the whole shape-shifting thing with Sauron, like why would he do that? Why did he have to do that? Why would he do that?
Shapeshift?
Or change into a human and not just stay as himself if he didn't need to change.
Because he uses it. Because he uses it to trick people. So like that's how he gets Celebrimbor to build the.
Well, yeah, but if it's gonna take him like 1,000, so is there 2 of him or is there just one of them?
Just one, but they don't. The books and the materials that they're using don't indicate that there's an impact on him. Chances are it's not him. I could see it being the voice of Sauron, or some, you know what I mean, and that could be Adar. Like this new character Adar, he's got the gloves that look like Sauron's gloves when he walks through. Like you talked about those claws; those are his gauntlets, and so
the gauntlet, yeah,
that look like Sauron's gauntlet when he's in his armor. but I don't think that's going to be Sauron. Maybe it is, but I don't think it will be.
What is Sauron?
He's what you call a Maya, or he's like an angel, fallen angel. He's kind of his power scale.
Is he basically Satan in Christianity?
Pretty close,
more or less.
But I always thought, or when I watched, I thought Adar was going to be a black Numenorian.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to you, JJ, that they might be going the way of the video games, the Shadow of Mordor series, where you have these black Numenorians who kind of make up Sauron's inner circle. And that would be cool because that's, again, someone that has no ties to anything we already know. You can make up whatever you want about this dude.
Yep.
All right. Well, for me, that doesn't know a ton of this lore, I mean, while it's a little, you could say it's a little slow at times in their building, man, I really am enjoying the building of. There's so many interesting plot lines, so I'm quite intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah, the only other thing that I keep thinking about that kind of like makes me twitch a little is, and where you talk about like the black Numenorians and things like that, is we also have this overarching thing that this movie's about the Rings of Power. As far as I can tell, at the very least, unless there's a double timeline and the Harfoot timeline's different, the Rings of Power have yet to be created, at least in the three of the major storylines, right? If the Harfoot turns out to be a different timeline, is that after that they've been made? Because where the hell are the 9 human kings? Because now we also have this human king from the Southlands that is in Numenor, of all places. And is he one of the 9? Is that the Witch King? You know what I mean? Like, I hope not too, because I could have sworn, and I didn't. I meant to look it up before we started, but I didn't, because that's me. I could have sworn that we knew the Witch King's name, but I could be wrong.
I always heard it was
maybe it's just because where he's at, the Witch King of Angmar.
Yeah,
and that's what I keep thinking. But
I do hope that they introduce him, though, because that would be a cool story with how he takes down Arnor in a later season if they decide to tell it. That would be dope.
That'd be way dope.
But yeah, it's just I don't know where they're going, and it has me nervous because they haven't done a very good job at saying where they are.
Yeah,
or even if they're gonna stick to the kind of the timelines that we know, if they're just doing their own thing. Because it's called the Reigns of Power, and we haven't seen a single Reign of Power yet.
It's only 3 episodes. They invested a ton of money. Well, give me like 6 seasons. We're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll have a lot of seasons to get there, and I'm sure the end point is hopefully to get to the last
battle, War of the Last Alliance.
Yeah, the Last Alliance.
We're only 3 episodes in. After all these other TV shows we've watched, like, it usually takes, 3 to 5 episodes for them to really even get anywhere. So
it's true. Well, and I just like, I for all the shit I talk on it, like, I do like it. Like, it's been interesting, and I like the pacing. I like the way that the show moves for the most part. It's just my knowledge that I have, and I don't even think I have as much. I think Alec has me beat on Lord of the Rings knowledge, which is cool. It's nice to not always be the one that
ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Exactly. But I know enough that there's little things that, like I said, and I'm such a freaking mind moron when it comes to overthinking things like this, that it does get in my way. So we don't know his name. His other names are the Black Captain, Captain of Despair, the Lord of Carrion, the King of the Nine Riders, and the Morgul Lord. So there's no actual, just the
that is one of the
Witch
coolest
King of
places
Angmar
in Lord of the Rings. Morgul just looked dope. Such a cool visual.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's Rings of Power. So it's been fun. Mattson, tell everybody where they can find us.
Yeah, you can keep checking us out at What's Our Verdict on YouTube for all of our live shows. If you want to listen to us at What's Our Verdict Reviews, wherever good podcasts can be found, you can do so. Check us out on TikTok to continue to see random movie trivia, us getting made fun of by Alec, Tiger videos, different things of that nature. And yeah, don't forget to hit that follow, like, or subscribe button, as JJ talked about, and then check us out at whatsourverdict.com and come and leave us a suggestion on maybe a TV show, certainly a movie that you'd like us to review, and we're happy to do so.
So with that, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye. But not really bye. But bye.
Cinemagic out.